Hey guys, welcome to our webinar, Risky Business. We'll give it a few more minutes just to see if we get a few more participants, but we're going to hit go in probably 30 seconds. Does that sound good, Val and Joe?
Yep.
Awesome. There we go. Nice. All right. So, welcome. I just wanted to do a quick introduction to my team today. Obviously, the topic is in front of you, and we're super, super excited because this is something I think that has gone untalked about for a little too long, and there's a lot of new trends in this space. Um, Before I go any deeper, I wanted to just introduce who I'm going to be speaking with today. I'm joined by Joe Bushy, who is president and CEO of VIVE. More president, less CEO these days, but he likes it. He likes both. He goes by both. And I also am accompanied by Valerie Rodriguez. She is with Keystone, specifically their innovation lab, and she is the director of process engineering and innovation, which I didn't even candidly know existed. And I'm so thrilled to hear your perspective on all things compliance, vendor risk, and jumping right in. I mean, when you guys think about vendor risk, let's just attack the topic. What's like really the first incident or concern that comes to mind? Like, is there a way we can kind of mass educate everyone who's on and fill in the blanks?
Yeah, thank you for the intro and the attendees coming today. So, taking a further step back, before coming into Bob, I used to run a management company in Michigan. So I've probably done a small version of what all of the attendees here had done in my years past. So I've been in the trenches. So since all of the folks attending here have been in the trenches, and you're looking at a budget at the association level, it's eye-popping to see over the last several years, in particular, the rising and inflated cost of insurance. And so that's what a lot of the driving realm of where Vive is here to help try to mitigate that as best as we can as you engage vendors. Honestly, to kind of set the stage. It's just there's no way that insurance can't be you have to have it to kind of operate at an association level, but if since you have to have it, it's a really block on your budget to have to deal with. How can you help keep that as competitive as possible? Because at the end of the day, the condo or HOA fee that feeds those association policies, if you have a big loss run or just a consistent theme of losses, it's going to rise up, and you'll be, from a competitive standpoint in your budget, to an uncompetitive and in a really tough way. And so we will kind of just work that back into how managing vendors can help reduce any unnecessary claims so that you're really keeping that loss run to a competitive basis for their fee structure. So every time, I think every day we just deal with vendors in this space. They're super necessary and super vital. I don't want to ever take away that vendors are the problem, but they are obviously in a situation where accidents can happen. I mean, at the end of the day, every vendor, even the best of vendors, has an accident. There's always something that can happen, and that's what insurance is for. So having a tight vendor management process kind of pulls it together, just saying, hey, you're going to have to deal with this at some point. Let's not learn in retrospect what a vendor has for a policy to open up the door for unnecessary claims. So, anyways, at that
No, that's
point where
super
we're
important.
really, yeah, and so probably when we talk to most management companies at the beginning, there's a lot of answers as to, oh, we kind of take care of this, but usually not a really well-funded vendor policy management process where it's like, oh, our manager does this, or AP does this, or, what, we use the same vendors over and over. Some kind of generic vanilla answer as to, we kind of think we're doing it, but if ever they really take a pause, as I said before, my past ownership of a management company, I was under the delusion that the training that we had done years and years ago with the same people in place was still happening. And I dove back into the AP and managerial level, and I was like, wow, we are really askew from what I thought we were supposed to be doing. And I don't want to say that people don't have good interest or efforts involved. It's just there's really no management over top of it internally to really put your thumb on whether or not your people have had the opportunity to really vet the vendors. And so that's where Vibe kind of just cements that together. So
No, that's so helpful. Anything, Val, and from your perspective on this, just kicking it off and what you're seeing?
No, I think Joe touched on a lot of those points, and we'll get deeper into kind of where he left off, right? And the massive responsibility of taking on ensuring all that the insurance is proper and correct on an ongoing basis. So we'll get more into that.
Perfect. Cool. Let's keep going. I think, we're all sitting here wondering, kind of what is that big challenge that can be faced with vendor compliance? And I guess in more recent years, like, what are you guys hearing? What should we expect as users also?
Well, just expect that the focus over top of risk mitigation is going to continue to grow. As I said earlier, with the rising cost of insurance, insurers are they're being very, very choosy
Yeah,
over who they insure. And so anything that they can find a hole in your process to manage risk will potentially lead to a more limited pool of insurers to come back and insure the association. So if you have no policy or one that can't be articulated and managed, it just opens up the threshold for the associations managed to be in a position that it could cost them more just because, again, I think if you take a step back, most clients think and expect and hope the management entity is fully nailed down on vendor management. They get involved in making the decision of who to hire and kind of like what to do, but really the nuts and bolts and the day-to-day oversight, let alone like non-contractual stuff like time and material, like work order kind of things, that's what the management company is there to do, to manage those daily affairs so the boards don't have a full-time job, right? And so this really comes back to the in-house processes at the management company to be really in step with expectations at the client level, so that the performance of the association's insurance is as best as possible. So I think the other's thought of it too, and we'll go into this, is typically most management contracts will kind of push off the responsibility of if there is a loss to the association because you are acting as an agent, rightfully so. Those contracts should be worded there. I've yet to find a company, myself included, running one before that you want to go and actually have to have them cover you for these types of acts because it's just that even on the best case scenario, just leaves a bad taste in the mouth of a client to say, wait a minute, what's going on over here if we're having to cover administrative efforts that really should be
right.
tightened down? And
And
so that go ahead.
but what if they don't take these risks? Like we obviously can see the risks, like they're very clear when they're spelled out in black and white. But like what happens, what's the fallout if you're not taking this seriously?
The fallout could be loss of a client. So if the client has to cover it, their loss run goes up. They're going to start pointing fingers. Likely, you're going to at least have a soured relationship, potentially lose that. If it's a high profile case, I'll just kind of step into my past experience running, like how Vive kind of came to be in my brain was I had a vendor, small sole proprietor. Everybody loved him, gave him a bunch of work, and grew from small to medium. And he came into our office and said, found me and said, "Hey Joe, I just want to let you know I had an accident property. I took care of it, but I just want to let you know." And what it amounted to is that he was out on a property doing plumbing work. By the way, he was a handyman, so when you dive into plumbing, now you're talking a licensed activity. He soldered. Copper line together with soldering equipment, which obviously has like sparks and like heat and all that kind of stuff. So he threw water on it to diminish
Wow.
the potential of a fire. It's the middle of summer. We're in Michigan. It's dry. Leaves the building, starts driving out of the project. Happened to look back in his rearview mirror and see 5 foot flames coming up the building, right? And so he went back, thankfully, ran back out there, stopped it, and burned a bunch of siding. And he covered it out of his pocket. This is a good story, but let me kind of go into why this kind of opened in my mind. Went back, looked at his insurance, is like, because he came to me and I'm like, oh my goodness, we could have burned a 4 unit, there's a condo, it's a 4 unit building. So who knows, maybe 10, 12 people in the building at the time. There could have been injuries, let alone potential deaths, all the building coverage issues had he not just looked back and saw this, because it would have probably in the next few minutes went from like small to, unable to get probably put out without, true fire emergency people on site. And so I was just worried because at the point where that happened, we were really a large company, a small area. So we were a great target for a news camera to come in and be like, how did this happen at your properties? You're supposed to be watching the vendors. And I went back and saw the vendor had half the amount of general liability coverage that we professed to say that was in place for all of our country. He had a 500,000 where we said 1 million was the minimum. He didn't have work comp because when he started as a sole prop, but he was starting to bring people with him, still work comp exemption on file. And he wasn't a licensed plumber, he was doing plumbing. And I'm like, we didn't even have a license verification thing. So why is that involved? Like this kind of stuff happens all the time. And by the way, this guy's a great vendor, like all the things that you would sleep good at night, handing off contracts or work orders to. So this just, it happens all the time and we just don't see it often enough. But when it happens, it could be terrible. So like the huge thing is reputation risk because had that gotten dove into with a claim, we would have been run through the mud and lost things that you can't really get back sometimes with reputation.
Yeah, that's why. Valerie, anything from your side that's sort of eerily similar that you want to share?
And not from our side, but I do hear a lot of feedback, oh, we trust this vendor, oh, we know them. So I'm glad that Joe touched on that. Because even the best vendors could have potential accidents and costly ones as well.
Yeah, and
Sure.
that last bullet point is really important. The small jobs we always don't think about. It's the roof replacement, the road replacement, the capital expenditures, the major contracts that consume the majority of the budget viewpoint. But and rightfully so, they should be covered with risk. However, we first tend to forget about homeowner calls in and they got a roof leak or there's something going on. There's probably just as many, if not more, claims there because of just the thought that these are both smaller jobs and smaller vendors at play that the administrative lift it takes to kind of keep in place is just not worth it. We've had way more claims from a vendor just going out and doing something as simple as driving a nail through drywall and hitting a fire suppression system on a small job that you just didn't think about because they really weren't thinking about those things. And
Right.
those are the type of claims that really go underlooked when you look at who's involved and what was asked of the vendor as it relates to this. So that's why Vibe sits into like an everyday use case, like big or small. You've got at least got this minimum protection across all your vendors when you see them approved.
Yeah. I've taken risks at home personally, and every time I go outside your network or a reputable network that vets everybody and has these provisions in place, I fail. I fail. I won't share my anecdote because I'm actually still too upset about it. And I think you covered the topic really well, but literally I'm living
And
proof of using reputable vetted vendors, making sure everything's compliant and a large scale, right? I'm talking about a really small personal scale, but on a large scale, this could be a massive headache. And I do want
yeah,
to dive into the insurance side
sure.
of
We'll
things.
keep going. Yep.
Yeah, should we hit the next slide? Perfect. So what kind of insurance coverage do you think most vendors are like kind of missing or they don't quite understand that they need, maybe?
Sure. So we'll talk at the it states here five essential pieces.
Yeah.
Typically, the two biggest would be general liability. That's the first and foremost. That's the kind of baseline of insurance. Work comp, I know, is across most our clients when we start, if they're doing anything to obtain proof of coverage, what they're asking for. But just, so then let me keep going on this. The third one that's like the most necessary or just needed across the vendor base is commercial auto. Vendors who are acting in a commercial capacity need to have their autos covered in a commercial capacity. That's typically overlooked by clients coming into a program with us just to help educate them. By the way, we have a risk manager that helps kind of get you through all this kind of stuff that will give you those details. The other two that are more specialty would be professional liability. So you're still hiring attorneys, CPAs, insurance agents, all of the different folks that are giving you guidance. So even engineers or architects, they're maybe putting specs together for these jobs. They still are giving their advice, and so there's risk associated with that. So we vet those flavor of contractors as well. And then last would be a function of typically the GL's umbrella coverage. So if you get into the situation I mentioned earlier with like capital projects. standard $1 million policy may not be enough. You might want to have an umbrella for certain categories of trades, roofers, tree removal companies, people who are in a really heavier risk, elevator companies, things of those natures that by their very nature, just doing their daily job would really need those heavier coverages. So those are the type of coverages that we'll help implement within the design of the program for each client. But that's the broad spectrum of coverages. So,
Cool.
things like pollution too, I'll go into the next one. So like I'm a restoration company and typically when they go in, almost everything that they're doing to remediate, like remove out the drywall that's been either burned and or usually soaked with the fire hose is going to be considered at some point after a period of time pollution because it's a polluted material. And so those are the type of things we help further augment to make sure that those are in place, that contractually that they're bound to it. And so, why it's important, though, on top of what coverages are necessary, is because we are agents here in the management industry of the boards, is making them understand their responsibility for the decisions to hire vendors. And so, this bullet point's a little aggressive in that they may have personal liability. At minimum, if they're not acting in a fiduciary, like judgmental, like responsible manner, they're representing their constituents at the HOA or condo. And if they're completely absent on how they're hiring their vendors and just forcing any, chucking a truck, if you will, through there to save the dollars, that's really going to come back at minimum to eventually loss run at the building level. Their D&O policy is going to get looked at because they're going to say, hey, who's approving these vendors? And if you get further deeper in the weeds and you find that there's just no rhyme or reason, they're just going at all lowest cost, no holds barred kind of decision, you end up potentially in the spot of getting your D&O coverage nixed or super increase, or potentially say, hey, you're completely negligent in how you're representing these decisions. And so why take on any liability in that manner is our standpoint there. So the bad advice thing. So yeah, as you said earlier, your personal thing, Melissa, everyone's trying to save a dollar. Board members are no different.
Oh my
And
God.
but saving a dollar, there's nothing in the board's, bylaws that says thou shall save a dollar. It says thou shall do the right thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that applies here to hiring vendors.
So it sounds like it's a easy sell to boards. Is there like any reason it's conflicting for them? It sounds like you made the
Um,
case that they should
it's
all buy in.
the only conflict is just education. So making sure that they understand that this is in their best behalf. That where our program fits in terms of economics is there's a fee placed at the association, not the association of the vendor level. So it's just getting them to understand that yes, they are still the owner of who comes on the property, but understanding the marriage of this relationship, this program with the management helps cement while they're making those decisions that they don't have to look over the shoulder and make sure this vendor's, really a choosable vendor if they haven't been vetted. They really, when the likes of Valerie and Keystone and other management companies that we're thankfully representing across the US and into Canada, knowing when they look at the word approved in our system and when they give their boards a list of vendors to choose from, now you've got a baseline that they're at least all on a competitive and equal playing field. So going outside of that pool means you just may not have that same credibility.
Val, anything on the board side of this? Because I think that's an important point from
Yeah.
your experience personally.
And Joe kind of touched on it, but what I think that boards like is that the vendors that they love and they want can always become a part of Vive, right? If they go through the proper steps. And then in addition to that, the flexibility of those various vendor insurance types Joe touched on, they
Mhm.
appreciate that, right? Because we're not trying to fit everyone into the same category or the same box. We have flexibility in, okay, this type of vendor is going to require these types of insurance and so on. So from the board perspective, I think they understand that, we're looking out for their best interests. So those two things
That's a
they,
great segue. You brought up insurance, and I wanted to segue a little bit into the state of the insurance market. Thank you, Nitesh. Um, and I know Joe had hit on this earlier, but inflation has become a topic for underinsured vendors and this sort of macroeconomic trend, like how does it shift the burden onto management companies? Does it, or is it not really a thing that I'm thinking of?
No, the cost of insurance. This whole point of this slide is to reiterate what I think has become extremely well known in the management space is that insurance has gone up crazy. Just last year, the tragedy in California with the endless fires. A couple of years ago in Florida with the collapse of the building, let alone just the ongoing things that are constantly coming up. I know up in my area, Michigan, hailstorms have become a real issue. At the end of the day, insurance companies are here to bring in more money than to pay back out. Like in the most simplest form, like they are literally the function of like the casino in Vegas, right? They are always going to win, right? So if they take enough losses, their actuaries who are watching the back end of the performance are going to start tightening up as they already have. They'll stop dropping or offering coverage, and where they keep available coverage, they're going to get really picky and have a lot of like pitfalls. And at the end of the day, the where we're trying to control costs for insurance, we can't stop. The management industry cannot stop the inflation, right? The building costs have gone up. No
Yeah.
one's going to ask our approval for that, right? That just happens. We can't stop the wildfires. We can't stop the tragedies or just the everyday accidents. What we can focus on as it relates to this is, well, okay, this world is going on around us. Why not tighten up and prevent a potential loss with vendors so we don't add additional fuel to that existing fire? That's the theme here.
No, it makes sense. That 1.1 trillion is a huge number. When you say insured losses, can you quantify that universe and maybe how it changed from like the decade prior? If you know that data, not to put you on the spot.
Don't have that. I can tell you this data was put together before the fires came out last year, so that's a really low number if you
That's
really want
it's
to
yeah,
hear it.
I
Yeah,
honestly sadly was like, it could be low. I'm gonna question
it's
this. So
low.
we're
Yeah,
we're
I
holding
should
you
get
to an
some.
answer on that.
No problem. Gives me something to follow up on.
And I just want to like break for the audience for a quick second. If there are questions that come up over the course of what we're discussing, feel free to throw them in the chat and we will weave them in, time permitting. But I think we covered that pretty well. I want to move on into how Sync and Vive solve for that risk cohesively and really kicking this off. I'd maybe lead with Val and how your experience. I know people love to hear firsthand from users, and not only you're a super user, right? Because you're leading innovation for a super large company, and I'd love to hear what this has meant for you and what's been unique in your experience with Vive and Sync working in tandem.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. So when we look at this, there's a couple of different key points for this partnership with Vive and Keystone, and of course the integration with Sync. And Joe talked a little bit about ensuring compliance and the limiting the risk of reputation, liability there. But also from our perspective, we're really doing it for the client, right? Because at the end of the day, it's mitigating the risk for them and adding value to our contracts by including that. Now, on the flip side of that, from a Keystone perspective, we're really focused on growing. And what Vive, what our partnership allows us to do is really scale, right? So we're able to keep a very minimal in-house team who's working on vendor tracking and insurance and implementation of, various tasks vendor related, but also we were able to scale largely through that partnership. And Joe, if you want to touch on anything I've mentioned there, feel free to jump in before I go more into the integration.
No, no, whatever we say about Vibe is only so far. Whatever a client says speaks so much more. And Keystone's been a valued client of ours and just one of several within the Sync ecosystem that we've helped. And so we'll go into some other features that Vibe provides, but really, we just wanted to make sure the users heard from another user that this has helped them and why did they make the decision and how has it shown value? So yeah, no, Val, that was great.
Yeah. Well, and then from the integration side, and this is just feedback that I hear from managers every day, is it's so nice to not have to bounce back and forth between various softwares. So when our managers are already logged into Sync for various tasks, they can go straight into that vendor screen. They can view insurance stat or vendor status. They can view the insurance contracts themselves. They can even look at suspended vendors to see what's going on and why are they in that particular status. And so it's a kind of a one-stop shop, which, if you guys have any multiple logins anywhere, you understand the value of being able to find everything in one spot.
Oh, super valuable. And it sounds like we're solving for what used to be a lot of manual work. And I want to also touch on while we're here, the rev share model and like what
Yeah.
Vive's model and rev share opportunities look like just for our users at large.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you touched on that. So Vive, through part and parcel of what we do for compliance, that as I mentioned earlier, it's a vendor paid for model. A slice of that payment towards the vendor level is able to be parted off and pushed to the management company. So our team can help analyze each market may have some differences in pricing, and we can show what's the market price in the area and have you make a qualified decision. But we want to help. Valerie still mentioned there's still people involved in the back end of at Keystone with Vive's program. We want to at least offset that or and put those folks off of the P&L of the of the management company at worst, but at best some additional pocket money. So we want to help kind of fuel the management industry. We put over $2 million back into the management industry collectively across all our clients last year alone. So.
Wow.
And so this
That was 2
this should
million,
not
right? You said 2
2 million.
million?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. It's growing,
It's
and so
impressive.
well, yeah. I want to make sure we're on the same page. Making money on this program should not be your first decision, but we will do that
Totally.
alongside it. We're still
Totally.
not behind me on my tagline is trust but verify. We always want to make sure that we come across first as a compliance company. But
Yeah.
anything in this management space, because it's such a thin margin, as well as just why not join in the Rev model where we have that built in for you. And we can talk further offline on that one, but it is there. Um,
Sounds meaningful.
yeah, thank you. There's a
Is
couple
is
things on this
there
slide here, but I don't want to inject. Valerie may have some
go-
thoughts.
yeah,
Go
Val,
for it.
did you want to add any
Um,
more to that
No,
context?
I think what Joe's saying is right about the rev share is a benefit, but the not the biggest one, right? And that reduction in manual work, I want to just touch on another piece here is, and Joe, you touched on this earlier when you mentioned, we're tracking general liability, we're tracking auto, but are we looking at licensing and are we looking at this? So what Vive does is it brings this standard, right? This standard up in what we were doing in the past. And now we have just a really great process that there's not holes in. And that's much easier for a small workforce to manage versus, looking across a portfolio of hundreds of communities and not knowing what is the proper, standard. So just
It's
another point.
amazing. I mean,
Yeah, good
you
point.
such a large portfolio, you want that visibility. It sounds like it's critical and almost non-negotiably essential, right? So
I mean, the bigger you get, the more risky you have to be, adverse to. So the more, just really simply put, the smallest management companies, there's too much stuff in the day to day to really probably be this the first focus. But every conference we go to, every management company seems to be growing, buying other management companies. So Keystone may be further along than some of the other clients in terms of size, but it always seems to be that everybody's kind of trailing along. We're a never-ending growth function. And so at some point, the realization of even staffing or trying it versus outsourcing it is just a forcing reality to look at this. But let me go into what Valerie said earlier, because that was some of the stuff on our first few bullet points here that I want to hit home. Even if you're working to attempt to collect COIs, even enter data into Sync where you can, there's some real big pitfalls compared to what we offer. Licensing being one, Valerie said that earlier that we do that. So we're going to go to the state or states the vendor is operating in that overlaps with the management company's portfolio and make sure at the state level, if they say, I said earlier, electrical or plumbing as two generally required state license trades, we're going to make sure that that vendor is truly active and licensed. So we're going to provide that peace of mind. On top of trade licensing, we do business verification. This is really a fraud preventative measure that we have in place, which I can pretty much tell you across the board in every management company is just void. So we actually take the information that the vendor is going to eventually e-sign a W-9 with and part that out and take the business name and the tax ID number, whether it's EIN or SSN. We go straight to the IRS for validation. Why is that important? Well, fraud is a big issue, right? Anybody with Adobe right now can do whatever they want with any kind of document, right? And so unless you have a tool like what we build for you seamlessly in the process, you have no way to really know when you put them in accounting, are they who they say they are? So we provide that. We also have government watch list screening, all kind of built right in there. So at least you have some kind of baseline to know that when they went into accounting, they are at least been verified at that level. That ties together the business vetting at the insurance so that the insurance certificate actually is bound at the legal name of the vendors. I know that that's an important piece because they gave you a COI. Did anyone actually look to see if the business name on the COI, the certificate of insurance, actually matched the W-9? Like there's just kind of some things that nobody really thinks about until you really do enough of this, like we've done to realize that from front to back, it's got to be nailed down. The other thing I want to kind of point out is in the third bullet point the vendor service agreement. So, like, even if you're getting certificates of insurance and you're entering the data in and watching when they're expired, and you're doing all the things, right? That's great. That's better than 80% or more of our clients that come into because most don't want to spend the time or effort to actually do all that. But even if you go through all of that, staff it, manage it, hold payments, deal with agents, if you don't have an agreement with the vendor that when a claim happens that they're going to cover it, you are really doing a lot of work for the love of entering data and staying busy. So Vive's process is going to force a vendor that we help establish for you, the management company, on behalf of your clients, and what we call master or vendor service agreement. And so it's going to bind the insurance terms so that when and if a claim comes up, you don't have to go back and say, well, what about this? It's a living, breathing document that as you grow and contract with your clients and the vendors get pulled across, that it sets the stage for it. And so it just enforces the insurance requirements right then and there. So it's really just a complete miss. And even if there is a tool out there at the client level, I've always seen it at just one property. Understand vendors work. Val, how many properties do you guys have? Associations? Hundreds?
Yeah,
Thousands
almost
now?
we're nearing the 1,000 mark. Yeah.
They're in the thousand, right? And that might be way larger than some of the folks on this call, or way small. But at the end of the day, if you have more than like four or five, even at the smallest of levels, one vendor going to a different product, you really want contracts that established in each of those and then having to manage those in place. Think of the nightmare that as you grow, that ends up doing. Vibe underscores all of that with the vendor service agreement so that it applies to all of your properties and the insurance is to be bound in that way. It tightens all of this up so the loopholes are just not out there. So I just wanted to kind of hit like why does that further make sense to outsource it, even if you're doing the things you're still in a very big exposure with doing them.
I
On
feel
top
like
of all of what we
the
submit, yeah,
advent of AI too, right, Joe? I mean, it like
yeah,
makes all the bad actors come running out.
yeah,
Are there
yeah.
any AI implications you want to hit on as it relates to any of this? I know that's not necessarily the focal point here, but that was one of the questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Um, you want to touch on that really quick? I mean, it could just be the implication of the extra risk because of AI, but are there any advantages you're seeing in the product environment through AI at this
It's helping
stage?
us, yeah, AI is helping us speed up the data onboard because we're still onboarding data. But what we do outside of just using AI ourselves to speed it up, just like anyone else can, is we go right to the agent. So a lot of the times vendors will just have an on hand like what's called for informational purposes only. You bought a policy and they gave you the policy and they have like this kind of generic like proof of policy certificate of insurance, but it doesn't have anything on it that's really binding. It just states some super bare bones basics. And so instead of going to the vendor or having them even doctor up at the vendor level, anything at Adobe, we go right to the insurance agent because the agent information is required to be filled in. So we just bypass that because they're the representing agent for the policy to put on there. And there's no matter what's on hand with a vendor, it won't get passed because they have to additionally insure and endorse the management company and the list of properties that they manage. That language doesn't exist on the standing COI. So it requires an agent
Got
who
it.
gets served a copy of that agreement to know what they're bound by. So it really tightens it up.
So
So
we
yeah,
still need the human element for
you
now.
still need a human element, but we're balancing the AI and the human element to the level that really in order to mitigate risk. So yeah.
Amazing. Less tedious, more meaningful, right?
Yep.
I had one other question through the chat on features that exist or any new features besides compliance that this audience should be considering they may not even kind of have an awareness of.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're, as I said, we're always going to hopefully be known as a compliance first program. We have a very robust RFP bid module, so you can use for free. There's no cost at the client level or vendor level to engage vendors in a very professional bid. So you can use the tool to go out, ask, tell them what you're looking for and obtain through their portal and or your data entry what their pricing is, and then have a very professional comparison and award model so that you can go to your boards. So we've had that for quite some time. We don't talk about bids that often, simply because it does kind of just differ. It it's a nice byproduct. It's a great tool. I think everybody should use it, use more of it, but we want to still just make sure, are you coming into Vive using approved vendors as the first focus? Competitors of ours lead with bids and kind of had a light compliance thing. So I tend to not talk about it often, but it's a huge value point that's built part and parcel of it. But bids are out there for option A for your question there, Melissa. Options B and C are just our new features here. Find a vendor and find a client. So you can come into Vive now. And not only Valerie looking at her vendors that have registered with Keystone, you can look outside to, I mentioned like 140, 150 management companies across the US in your different markets, and you can quote, find a vendor. So you go out of your network, look for the electrician that you're looking for that may not, you may maybe say you just only have one electrician in your area and you need another one. You can look out there and send invitations and kind of acquire from other management companies that are using Vibe to qualify, to get vendors who are already pre-qualified on another relationship. So it's a huge sourcing tool. You can also use this kind of cool feature. If it's an address, like let's say you took on a property, you're like, I don't know, it's kind of far from the rest of the stuff. Do we have vendors over there? So you can actually type an address in. And because we determine during the vendor's registration their vendor address, their business address, they tell us also how many miles they'll travel from their office to service. So we have this reverse engineering to say, okay, hey, fine, Mr. Management Company, 1234 Anyway Street, you can now find in reverse, yeah, this vendor says they can service it. And it works within your own network as well as if you have to use the Find a Vendor and look at the Vibe network. So it's a huge sourcing tool, and that's all free, right? We want to give more exposure to vendors. Conversely, vendors who, by the way, will pay these fees and not go out of business and still be happy to pay them is because they want business exposure with management companies. This is coveted market. Nobody wants to deal with Melissa and her homeowner thing. That's a pain in the butt. But
They don't.
well, they don't. Nobody wants to do
They really
that.
don't.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, commercial coveted work. Let's think about the value. Valerie, how often you pay vendors? Is it monthly, weekly?
Weekly.
Right. You give
Yeah.
out bids all year long. You give out work orders daily, right? To get in front of that potential business is huge. If I'm a vendor and I want to get through your front door, does it say welcome vendors come in every day and interrupt our business and have coffee? Does it say that at the front, or does it say no solicitation? It's got, yeah, yeah. That was tongue in cheek, right? But the point is, Vive provides a way to get out of that no solicitation. You can just go through Vive at a vendor, look for clients that service that are under our contract that service the areas that they're in, and they can just register and automatically they have proof in the pudding on the client list to show that they're approved under the trades that they're there. It's a huge exposure for a vendor. So that's like to answer your earlier question, Melissa, what new or what else do we have besides compliance? I just wanted to hit that so that you
Yeah,
guys
you
understand. We
sold
can
me
help
on
you
the
grow.
RFP tool because if anyone's ever done RFPs, and I've done a lot in my career, in any industry, you can relate to what that entails. And
Yeah.
then knowing you're getting a vetted list already back, you're like 12 steps ahead, and that it
Yep.
aggregates that whole process is just a
Mhm.
huge time saver.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I look at success by hours, man hours saved with all of this. I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Joe, if I may, one of the things, when we look here at Keystone, what our managers love about Vive is that they can do exactly what you're stating, right? They can go into the system. Maybe they're not familiar with a job that the board wants to do. They type in, pavers and they all come up, even though they've never done a paving project before. And one of our managers here was saying, that's how I found my new favorite vendor through Vive. And so it is that, kind of, not only did she find a favorite vendor, but it was easy for her to do that. And then to your other point, we get asked all the time, how do I become an approved vendor? What do I do? And now we have this very seamless answer, right? Here's what
Yeah.
we use. And so
Yeah.
those
Go to
two
the
topics.
Keystone website and become a
Yeah,
vendor, and it links
become a
you right
vendor.
over there. So it's a really
Yeah.
easy way for managers to just push their vendors over there, and the vendors to not even call the office. They can go right on your website. So yeah, we work. That's how simple and easy it is. So
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I feel like we're coming up on time. If there's any last questions, throw them in the chat. We do have a few more minutes, but I wanted to go back to the last slide just to kind of see the key takeaways for the group. So we've got, just to reiterate, the hidden cost of non-compliance that we've kind of beat like a dead horse. And I feel like that is very top of mind for everybody. The compliance protects your business and your reputation, making sure boards are understanding of the importance of all of this, especially if you've already had liabilities, kind of, you know, impact your business already. I think this is the right time to be thinking about these tools and really making this risk reduction and efficiency possible. Well, we've already integrated through CINC. So if you're a CINC user, this is already built in. We're going to continue to further the integration, and more features will hopefully be available soon. I can't quote dates on that, but we have a robust roadmap around finishing what I call a complete roadmap for the Vive integration. So more features to come on the sync side too, which is thoroughly exciting for me. I
yeah.
forgot to actually give my title at the beginning of the call, but everyone probably understands that I head vendor partner relations at Sync, which is why I was so happy to be having this conversation with an amazing customer and an amazing partner. And we just learn more together. So if there are questions that arise after this call, happy to take them via follow-up, and we will be sending out a postmortem after this, including the recording for those who missed. Feel free to forward it to folks on your team. Sync will be sharing it at Mask, probably on LinkedIn as well.
Great.
But anything else from you guys before we wrap for today?
Nothing from me,
I want to
Melissa.
thank Sig for putting this together, Keystone, to help support the
So
client side.
fun.
And yeah, just extremely excited to be here for sure. Thank you.
We'll
Yes.
see
Thank
everybody
you,
at Sync
everyone.
Up in T minus 30 days. Looking forward to more conversations. I'll be there, and let's keep talking about compliance. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Val.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Joe.
Take care.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.